I always knew I was different in my family. Not in a quirky, unique way that people pretend to like. It was the hard, suffocating kind of different that made every birthday, every dinner, every conversation feel like a test I was destined to fail. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, my house should have been a safe place, but for me, it was a battlefield. My father, Robert, was a commanding presence in every room, the type of man whose approval was gold and whose anger burned bridges. He had favorites, my two older brothers, Jason and Luke, his golden boys who could do no wrong. Me? I was the mistake, the shadow he tolerated only because I shared his blood. Even as a little girl, I noticed the patterns. My brothers got praise for things I did better. Jason scored the winning goal at his soccer game. Dad bought him a brand new cleat set the next day. Luke got straight A's on his report card. Dinner was a celebration. Me? If I even breathed wrong, I got a lecture on how I should try harder or stop embarrassing the family. There were times I heard him muttering about how I was too soft or not made for anything serious. My mother, sweet and quiet, would sometimes catch my eyes and give a sad smile, but never a word of defense. School wasn't my escape. It became another battlefield. Rumors spread like wildfire, some seeded by my brothers for their amusement. By middle school, whispers about me being a liar, a troublemaker, even damaged were everywhere. And my father, he swallowed those rumors like gospel. He'd call me into the living room, stare down at me from his leather chair, and ask, "Is this true, Emily?" And no matter what I said, I felt the weight of my own voice failing me. I learned to nod, to smile through the lectures, to disappear into my room, hoping maybe walls had ears, but no judgment. Birthdays were worse than holidays. Jason got his first car at 16. Luke got to travel to a summer camp in California. Me, a hand-me-down bike that barely rolled. And when I tried to speak up, my father's favorite line cut through. "Emily, don't be greedy. You'll understand your place someday." I didn't understand then, not fully, but I felt it in my bones, that my place was always one step behind, one mistake away from being erased. By the time I hit high school, the favoritism wasn't subtle anymore. It was brutal. My brothers could stay out late, bring friends over, even skip homework, and they'd get a pat on the back. Me? I had curfews, audits on my grades, lectures about family reputation, and every chance to mess up was magnified. And the worst part? The family dinners. I'd sit there, quietly eating, listening to my brother's achievements, nodding and smiling while Dad raved about them. And then, inevitably, the words would come. "Why can't you be more like your brothers?" I tried everything. I excelled in my studies, joined clubs, took leadership roles, even helped out in the community. But nothing mattered. Nothing was enough. There was always a comparison, always a disappointment. I learned to keep my dreams small, to whisper my ambitions in secret journals. At 16, I started planning my escape, though I didn't know when or how. All I knew was that I couldn't survive the weight of being the wrong daughter forever. And then, everything changed the night of my 17th birthday. It should have been ordinary, a small family dinner, just the four of us. But it turned into a revelation, a turning point I would never forget. That night started like any other, but the tension in the air was palpable. Dad had made a big deal about me turning 17, but it was one of those fake, performative celebrations. He said, "17 is important, Emily. Time to start thinking like a responsible adult." His words dripped with judgment. Jason and Luke laughed, teasing each other over college plans and girlfriends, while I sat quietly, trying not to make a mistake that would earn me another lecture. Then the incident happened. I had been saving up for months to buy a camera, my first real step towards pursuing photography, something I loved more than anything. I mentioned it casually at the dinner table, thinking maybe Dad might, I don't know, acknowledge me for once. I mentioned it softly. "I've been saving up for a camera," I said. "It's secondhand, but I found a great deal." The laughter stopped abruptly. My father's gaze sharpened, his hand tightening around his fork. "A camera? Emily, what do you need that for?" Photography is a hobby for people with time to waste. You should focus on school or helping your brothers prepare for college. Why can't you have priorities? I tried to defend myself, voice trembling. I do focus on school. I just thought. Thought, he snapped, cutting me off. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're selfish, Emily, always chasing silly dreams instead of doing what matters. My brother snickered behind him. Jason added, yeah, maybe you'll actually learn something if you do what Dad says for once. Luke chimed in, it's pathetic. You're 17 and can't even figure out your place in the family. I remember that moment vividly. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in. My chest ached, my hands shook, and I realized something terrifying. These were my people, my family, and yet they were telling me, outright, that I didn't belong. My father's voice softened, not out of warmth, but in that chilling calm he reserved for final judgments. Maybe it's time we rethink your role here, Emily. Perhaps less attention on you will help us all. I didn't even cry. I couldn't. My mother stared at me with that sad, helpless look, and I understood. She would never stop him. No one would. And just like that, the turning point was made. My father had declared, in his own cruel way, that I was expendable. The days that followed were worse. I was barred from family events, left out of conversations, my achievements ignored or twisted into ridicule. I overheard my brothers plotting to keep Dad happy by excluding me from everything fun or important. I started sleeping in the guest room to avoid the stares and sneers. And one evening, after another lecture where Dad berated me for being lazy and useless, I quietly packed a small bag, my heart pounding. I had no plan, no money, just a single resolve. I couldn't live like this anymore. I left under the cover of night, stepping into the cold Ohio air with nothing but hope and fear. For the first time, I felt the strange mixture of liberation and terror. I had no idea what awaited me, but I knew that at 17, I had chosen to stop being invisible, to stop being the mistake my family had made me believe I was. That night, I became a fugitive from the only life I had ever known. And I promised myself, silently but fiercely, that one day, I would not just survive, I would thrive. Leaving home was terrifying. I had no savings, no car, and no one willing to help me, not even distant relatives, because my father had poisoned any chance of sympathy with years of manipulative words. For the first few nights, I slept on park benches, hiding beneath layers of coats, clutching my backpack like a lifeline. Hunger gnawed at my stomach, and the cold Ohio wind bit my cheeks. But I kept walking. Every step was a small act of rebellion against a family that had told me I was worthless. I found refuge in a women's shelter downtown, a place full of quiet resilience. The other women didn't ask why I had run, they just let me exist. I took odd jobs, waitressing, dog walking, retail shifts, anything that could put food in my stomach. Some nights, I cried myself to sleep in the back room of the shelter, listening to the hum of the heating pipes and imagining a life where my father's voice no longer controlled me. I clung to one thing, my dream of photography. My old, battered camera wasn't enough, but I started taking pictures with my phone, capturing the world as I saw it, raw, unfiltered, alive. High school ended in a blur of night shifts and community college classes. I worked double shifts to pay tuition, learning how to budget, how to negotiate, how to survive without anyone's approval. Slowly, I built a network of people who believed in me. My professors encouraged my work, classmates asked to collaborate, and small local galleries began showing my photographs. For the first time, I felt seen, not by my family, not by my father, but by people who valued my voice, my vision. Then came the big break. A regional photography competition announced a scholarship for young artists. I hesitated at first, the old voice of doubt whispering, "What makes you think you deserve this?" But I ignored it.
I poured every sleepless night, every scrapped knuckle, every ounce of frustration into my submission. When I got the call that I had won, I cried so hard it blurred the lines between relief, pride, and pure disbelief. I had done it. I had built a life from scratch, a life that was mine entirely. College was another world. I moved to Chicago, taking a tiny studio apartment and juggling part-time jobs with classes and photography gigs. I stayed off social media. I didn't want my family to see what I was becoming, at least not yet. And every day, I reminded myself of why I was doing this. Not revenge, not to prove them wrong, but because I had the right to exist, to thrive, to define my own worth. By the time I graduated, my work had been featured in several exhibitions, and I had started selling pieces to collectors who valued the raw honesty in my photos. I rented a larger apartment, bought my first car with my own money, and finally felt the freedom of being unshackled from the family that had tried to break me. Every paycheck, every compliment, every small victory was a declaration I was no longer the girl my father called a mistake. But just as I was settling into this new life, a shadow from my past appeared. A letter, handwritten, postmarked from my parents' town. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. The words inside made my stomach drop. They wanted to reconnect. They had seen my success. They wanted something.
And that's when I realized survival wasn't enough. I had to confront them on my terms. I didn't respond immediately. I stared at the envelope for days, tracing my mother's familiar looping handwriting with a trembling finger. My heart thudded with a mix of anger and disbelief. After everything, the nights of hunger, the whispered rumors, the endless comparisons, the constant weight of being less than, they had the audacity to reach out? Finally, I decided to meet them, but on my terms. Not at their house, not in a neutral coffee shop, but at the gallery where my work was currently on display. If they wanted in, they would have to step into the world I had built with my own two hands. When they arrived, Dad looked the same. Tall, rigid, the kind of man whose presence had once made me feel small and insignificant. Jason and Luke lingered behind him, nervously shifting from foot to foot, while Mom trailed, trying to soften the edges of the storm she had once failed to stop. I greeted them with a steady voice, hiding the surge of memories and pain I felt. "You're here. Good. Let's walk." We moved through the gallery slowly, the walls lined with my photographs, street scenes, candid portraits, moments of raw emotion captured in light and shadow. I watched their faces carefully. My father's jaw tightened at the first photograph, a picture of a little girl alone on a bench, eyes full of longing and fear. My mother's eyes welled up, but she looked away quickly. Jason and Luke shifted uncomfortably, not used to being mere spectators in a story they hadn't authored. Finally, I stopped in front of my favorite piece, a self-portrait I had taken at 16, the night I left home. I hadn't thought anyone would ever see it. The expression on my face was raw, defiant, wounded, but unbroken. I looked at them and said plainly, "This is what you created. The girl you tried to erase, she's still here. She survived. She succeeded. And now, I decide what happens next." Dad's face turned red, and he opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "Before any apologies, before any explanations, I have one condition. You want a place in my life again? You will listen. All of you. You will hear the truth. Everything I endured, everything I suffered because of your favoritism, your cruelty, your lies." Mom's hand trembled on her chest. Jason and Luke exchanged guilty glances. Dad's mouth opened and closed, but I ignored him. I began recounting in precise, painful detail every insult, every exclusion, every whispered rumor, every night I had cried myself to sleep because I was less than in my own home. I described the manipulation, the favoritism, the toxic control, and I didn't stop until my voice shook and my heart felt lighter for the first time in years. There was silence when I finished. My father's face was pale, his composure cracked. My brother's eyes darted away, ashamed.
Even my mother couldn't meet my gaze. Finally, I said, now you know. If you want to be part of my life, you will have to acknowledge what you did. And you will have to understand that there is no going back to the way things were. Dad swallowed hard. Emily, we didn't realize. Save it, I interrupted sharply. I'm not here for excuses. I'm here for acknowledgement. And if you can't give me that, then leave. You will never control me again. For the first time, I saw hesitation, remorse, even fear in their eyes. I had the upper hand. I had forced them to see the consequences of their actions, not just in abstract, but in the tangible success and strength of the girl they had tried to destroy. They left that day, quietly, without another word. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small, invisible, or less than. I felt justice. I felt triumph.